Welcome to Troubleshooting Revit MEP. My name is Harlan Brum. I'm the Global Technical Lead for Revit Architecture and Autodesk Product Support. Today, we'll also be joined by Jeremy Smith, a Revit MEP Product Support Specialist. In this class, we'll talk about the top issues with Revit MEP and how to correct them. We'll discuss the troubleshooting techniques needed to resolve MEP specific problems. We'll cover an overview of the MEP workflow, discuss troubleshooting spaces and zones, and finally talk about how to troubleshoot Revit MEP performance specific problems. Let's start with the basic overview of the Revit MEP workflow. We'll start by creating a new project using the MEP template. We'll take the saved Revit architecture or structure model and make it a central file on our server. We'll link in that architectural or structure file using origin to origin. We'll set the link to be room bounding. Then we'll work on copy monitoring levels, and we'll create levels to account for the plenum spaces within the project. Now, I'm going to hand things over to Jeremy Smith to cover the workflow.
Okay, so for this video, again, under the context of troubleshooting the workflow and helping customers to understand the workflow, some of the steps we're going to show are also found in the Revit MEP help under the MEP workflow. And in addition to an outline of steps, there are a couple of links in there that show some of these steps. But for purposes of support camp here, we're just going to show a few of the basics. So to begin with, we're going to talk about linking in a project, copy monitoring levels, and setting up views. And then in later videos we'll get into spaces and troubleshooting the placement of spaces. So I simply create a new project using the mechanical template. And the next step now is I'm going to bring in the architectural link. So I'm going to go to the Insert tab, select Link, and I'm just using the architectural model that comes with the tutorials. Simple enough to use. And I'm going to use for positioning origin to origin, which typically is what we recommend for positioning. And I'll open that. So again, because I used a template, there's some pre-set up levels and associated views, but likely they're not the same elevation or even name as the levels on the architectural model. So just to view that, we're going to go to an elevation. As you can see, level 1 and level 2 here, those are included in the template. We're going to copy monitor these levels for purposes of setting up our views, and then of course associating hosted objects to the correct level. So the first thing I'm going to do is simply cross through the model here, and I can use filter just to select levels and just hit the delete key. So the levels and associated views will go away. So now what I want to do is create views based on the levels here. So I'm going to copy monitor those. To do that, just go to the Collaborate tab, copy monitor, select link, and then you can pick anywhere to select that link. The copy monitor options will appear in the ribbon. And in this case, I'm going to select copy, and because I'm selecting more than one level at a time, I'm going to select a multiple checkbox. And then you can do this one of two ways. You can hold the control key down and individually select these, or again, it's very simple. If you cross through here to use this filter option and eliminate everything except for levels. And as soon as I have what I need to copy and monitor, I'm going to select this Finish button, not this one, but this one in the options bar. And again, it's going to simply tell you that the types for the levels and levels markers are going to be used from the project. You can ignore that warning. And if I back out a little bit, you're going to see that monitor by default is already turned on. So you don't have to hit the monitor option. At this point, you can simply just finish. So now I have levels in my model that equate to the levels in the architectural link. And from there, I can create my views, and we're going to show that in the next video. Let me hit finish here to finish that out. And we'll pause this, and in a little bit, we're going to show a second video to how to create the levels and reflected ceiling plan levels and make sure the view templates are set correctly. So we've gone through the steps of setting up a project and linking in the architectural model, and then using Copy Monitor to get in the levels from the architectural link. So we're just going to go through the basic steps of setting up views. And again, these steps are found in the help files under the MEP workflow, but it's just worth kind of going through visually what a user should typically do in their MEP project. So we already have the levels copy monitored. So if we go to the View tab, let's start by creating floor plans. Under Plan Views, you can select Floor Plan. And here are the levels that we copy monitored. Just highlight those. You can do them all at once, or you can do them selectively. It's entirely up to how the user wants to do it, and of course select the scale. So it's going to use those levels to create all of the plans. And depending on what is in Options, and let me just go there real quick under Options here. It specifies what the default view discipline is when a new view is created. So in this case, it's mechanical. Electrical firms may just want to set their options to be electrical, so they don't have to keep resetting the main discipline for their views. So as we can see, we have mechanical, HVAC, floor plan views. And again, the view template for these by default has already been applied for mechanical, but what we should do, just to make sure that these are already have the right discipline set up, is select them all, apply view discipline, go to mechanical plan, and then you'll have a mechanical discipline, HVAC sub-discipline, and you can apply that. And so now these have set up to be the mechanical discipline with the associated visibility graphics. Now let's say you wanted to make a second set of plans for electrical power. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can copy these existing levels or duplicate them and then apply a different view template. Or you can go back into the plan view, and you'll notice because you've already made level views based on levels that the levels aren't appearing. But if you take off this do not duplicate existing views, you'll get these again. And when you make the new views, they're going to be basically renamed because they are in fact duplicates. But now you can selectively grab these and apply an electrical discipline, and you can make it either power or lighting, whichever you prefer, and we'll apply that, and then of course it'll move those to the correct discipline, and you can rename those as needed. So that's how in general you make views based on the levels that you copy monitored. One thing to keep in mind though, there is a unique setting for reflected ceiling plan views in MEP, and we'll show that in our next video. So one of the common question that we get from end users when it comes to creating views in Revit MEP is they apply the view template for electrical lighting, for example, if they want to set up their lighting views, but typically they need to see the ceiling on the architectural model to host their fixtures to. But a lot of times they'll apply the view template, but they still don't see the ceiling. It's usually because they may overlook the setting that's unique to Revit MEP and visibility and graphics for reflected ceiling plan. It's called Underlay Orientation. So we're just going to review that for a moment in case you get a question about or a question from users as to why they don't see the ceiling when they create a lighting view. Or mechanical view for that matter, where they would need to see the ceiling. But in this case, let's set up reflected ceiling plan views. And again, we'll grab our levels. We'll let those create. And we're going to make these electrical lighting. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to apply a view template to categorize these correctly. We're going to make an electrical ceiling. So it's electrical, and then the subdiscipline is lighting. So that's right so far. We're going to apply that, and it's going to put those in the right location. Let's open up one of those levels though. Now, if there were a ceiling here, and again I just used the model from the tutorial, so I haven't determined whether or not there's a ceiling, but the first thing that a user may say is, well, I've already made it an electrical lighting plan, why isn't the ceiling shown by default? And that's because applying a view template does not set up this underlay orientation by default to be reflected ceiling plan. So the second step after applying a view template is they have to go in here and set the orientation to be reflected ceiling plan. And then typically once they do that, in this case, now the ceiling grid appears. So it's just the way that Revit is looking at the model. It changes the cut plane and essentially looks in a mirror at the reflection of the ceiling. And again, this underlay orientation setting back in here, it's unique to Revit MEP. Now some users say, well, what if I want to look down on my plan and see the ceiling, for instance, to see my sprinklers in relation to furniture? Well, unfortunately there's no underlay orientation for that yet. So these are only choices. So just to troubleshoot that issue, if ceilings don't appear when they apply a lighting template, be sure that they set their underlay orientation to reflected ceiling plan.
Now that we've covered an overview of the Revit MEP workflow, let's talk about troubleshooting spaces. If spaces are not visible in a view, there are a number of items you can check to make sure things are set up correctly. First, verify the view range for the view is correct. Next, check the properties of the level. Make sure that the automatic room computation value is turned on. Check to make sure the phases on the host model match the linked model. Verify that the space base offset and upper limit parameters are set correctly. If you experience a rooms are unoccupied error, there are a few additional items to make sure are set correctly within the Revit MEP model. Again, make sure that phases match phases in the linked model. Make sure the phases are mapped properly. Make sure rooms exist in the architectural link. And finally, you can turn off the automatic room height computation in the levels type properties and set the height to 1 foot 0 just to make sure everything is working properly. Now that we've talked a little bit about troubleshooting these two common space-related problems, I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy Smith to talk more about spaces and phases within Revit MEP.
So one of the common issues that we deal with Revit MEP in placing spaces is that the corresponding room information from the architectural model doesn't carry through, and there's usually a couple of reasons for it. The first and most obvious is that there are no rooms placed in the architectural model. That's the first thing that you should confirm, that there are in fact rooms on that link. The second most likely or most common cause of this problem is the use of phases by the architect on their model. And so the rule, and this is even outlined in help, is that the phase that the spaces are placed on in the MEP model need to match the phase that the rooms are on. And even to the point where they have to be spelled exactly the same. So I'm going to show you an example of how that what that looks like rather when the rooms are on a different phase than the spaces are on. So here I'm in the entry-level plan of the MEP model, and I have a space schedule over here. I haven't placed any spaces yet in this model. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to this floor and place spaces, and just use the automatic space creation tool in 2010. I've already set the model, by the way, the linked model to room bounding, by the way. And just a reminder, you do that in the type properties when you select the link. So here I've placed spaces, that placed them successfully. I see the space tags here. But you'll notice right away that the room name and number aren't called out. Right away, that's an indication that it didn't find an associated room. And to confirm that, if we select one of the spaces and go into Element Properties, if we look down at the identity data, the room number name, it reads unoccupied. If there was a room in this location, it should identify the room by name and number. So I've already confirmed, for an example, for purposes of this example, that there are rooms, but in looking closer, I found out that on the entry level in the architectural model, the rooms were placed on a phase called Phase 1. So how do we go about fixing that here? Well, we have to create a phase in this model that matches exactly. So I'm going to go to, first thing I'm going to do is undo the creation of those spaces. I'm going to manage phases. And again, in looking at the model, I discovered that the phase was called Phase 1. In fact, it actually was after the new construction phase. In fact, that lineup has to match as well. So I'm going to say Apply. Then I have to go into my link by selecting it and go to Type Properties and go to Phase Mapping. And I have to make sure that my phases match exactly what the phase from the linked file is. So if this name is any different than this name, it won't work. But as you can see, they're identical, so I say OK and Apply. And then I'm going to go to my View Properties, make sure my current phase is set to Phase 1. Now when I place spaces, if I go back into Analyze, Spaces, automatically place them. The spaces are there, and by the way, I have to make sure my schedule is showing the right phase. There's the spaces and there's the associated room data, and again, it's because these were placed on Phase 1. So you have to make sure that the phases match exactly. If you don't see the room show up, that's one thing to check right away.
Poor performance is often an issue MEP customers face. There are some typical issues that you can look at to resolve poor performance problems. Here are some typical causes of the issue. First, not following the workflow that we've outlined. Making sure you're properly monitoring and copying walls and other objects. It's important in Revit MEP to create logical systems with ductwork and pipe in order for the performance to be optimized. Large connected duct networks can often be a cause of slower than expected performance. Complicated families can impact the performance of Revit MEP. Keeping the families as simple as possible can help to optimize the performance of the application. Often, simply having poorly connected elements in Revit MEP can lead to poor performance. Finally, color schemes have been shown to have an impact on the performance of Revit MEP. To resolve these performance-related problems in Revit MEP, there are a few things you can do. First, try to limit the use of color schemes within the Revit MEP model. Be sure you are creating logical systems for your ducts and pipes. Make sure that you're placing end caps on any open ducts. And finally, ensure the flow direction on all connectors is set correctly. Making sure these items are set correctly within the Revit MEP model can help to actually improve performance. In this lesson, we talked about the workflow specific to an MEP user and how to troubleshoot spaces, zones, and performance. Thanks for joining me and Jeremy today. We hope you learned a lot.